I take the opportunity to thank Dr. Julie and the entire CMC team for giving me this opportunity to be talking on role of nuclear medicine in the management of thyroid disorders in children today. So we are quite aware, and it's established to treat adult DTCs, differentiated thyroid carcinomas, and hyperthyroidism with radioiodine. We need to get acquainted with the nuances and special precautions which we need to take while we deal with children. So today we are having an opportunity to discuss a bit elaborately on two specific indications which we come across in children, that is differentiated thyroid carcinomas and hyperthyroidism. So in children, differentiated thyroid carcinomas, although rare, are treatable and give an excellent prognosis. And there are very few trials, but we should be going through a few of them to understand the prospects. And as in adults, we are going to discuss the surgical options and the role of radioiodine in pediatric DTCs. Similarly, we should also be touching upon the causes of hyperthyroidism, especially in children and a slightly older adolescent group also. So I'll be taking you through the pediatric thyroid carcinoma, the incidence, risk factors, and also we should be dwelling on hyperthyroidism today. So going ahead with the incidence of pediatric DTCs, obviously they are not as common, but we have seen that the trend is slightly more towards the adolescent group, where 1 in every 75,000 child may be presenting with the DTCs. And this is slightly less in the younger age group, less than 10 years. And studies have shown that pubertal girls are more accountable to get differentiated thyroid carcinomas when you compare the prepubertal age group. And it has been found that the papillary histology is the most common variant in pediatric DTCs, which come to around 60%, and medullary thyroid carcinomas are the least, only around 5% of cases. So let us just discuss in what way the presentations differ in children when we compare with adults. Children, unfortunately, present initially with more extensive disease. They seem to have a higher incidence of lymph nodal metastasis right at the time of diagnosis. The parents present to the endocrinologist or surgeons as, my child is having bilateral neck swellings. Even it has been seen that pulmonary metastasis usually present during the initial diagnosis itself to the range of around 20 to 30%. Not only this, multifocal thyroid disease is more common in children to the tune of 40%. Please note that these are not metastatic disease, but rather this multifocality is attributed to the proliferation of the individual clones of cells in the thyroid tissue. Although we have gone through the dismal presentation in these kids, it's very heartening to note that most of them have an excellent survival. Although pulmonary metastasis is the presentation, it can be easily and nicely handled with multiple sittings of radioiodine, and they seem to remain stable for a long time. And good news is bone metastasis is extremely rare, and whatever is the regional or distant sites of metastasis, all can be handled very well with radioiodine therapy. So let us go through what are the risk factors in children. It's always or mostly reported that any low levels of radiation to the head and neck region can go ahead with a nodal disease. And it has been reported that low level of radiation to the thyroid, less than 30 grams, can produce thyroid nodules and differentiated thyroid malignancies. As we are all aware of the Chernobyl fallout, so patients who are having a latency period of more than 5 years, almost more than 5,000 DTC patients seem to have, that is more than 5,000 children were found to have differentiated thyroid carcinomas. Similarly, when there is a longer latency period, we can have patients with Hodgkin's disease and leukemias. But most important factor is the age. Children less than 10 years are found to have the highest risk of DTC and extensive metastasis. So going to the genetics part, we are well aware that RAS mutations, BRAF mutations are common in adults. Unfortunately, the scene is different in children. In children, we see more of gene rearrangements like RET PTC1, RET PTC3. And those children who are exposed to radiation, RET PTC3 is implicated as the cause of the differentiated thyroid malignancy genetic profiling. So when you see a thyroid nodule, we have to be extremely careful. We should not be very negligent. We should be evaluating and investigating the child right from the nodule evaluation, right from the biochemical investigations, calcitonin, ultrasound, if necessary, FNSE. And we know very well that patients with increased intranodular vascularity in the thyroid on ultrasound, those with indistinct margins, microcalcification, and if they are subcapsular location, we need to ring the bell that we need to evaluate these patients for occult neoplastic thyroid etiology. Studies have also shown that any patient with ultrasound detected nodule almost always need FNSE because there is a 50% risk of occult malignancy in them. So we cannot be negligent, and we should properly investigate these children to identify presence or absence of any thyroid malignancies. So going ahead with the diagnosis and staging, unlike the adult staging where we use AJCC and UICC, it is not applicable. Age of the child, size do not matter here, unlike adults. One can use the MASIS staging, but it is only for the papillary thyroid carcinomas. The size criteria, as I was just telling you, 1 centimeter, 4 centimeters is not applicable to children. And most of the DTC patients are high risk or to be considered as high risk. And we must keep in mind that if we are negligent, if we do not treat them aggressively with the proper the surgical procedures or radioiodine treatment, the recurrence can be as high as 20 to 30% of the patients. So there is one particular study by Thompson et al., which has around 1,360 patients. Most of them had lymph nodal presentations, while the next was the pulmonary presentations. Unfortunately, it is seen that most of the children, more than 50%, present with pulmonary micrometastasis, which are usually missed on the chest X-ray and also on the CECT. But definitely, it can be identified on a whole body iodine scan. These patients also have been found to have a high recurrence rate if they are not being treated well. Similarly, what is the standard treatment protocols, surgery or radioiodine? There are not many studies which back each one of those therapeutic options. And it has also been shown that 10 to 20% of pediatric DTCs may have surgical complications because of the extensive neck disease at presentation. So here we have to note that it's not only the total thyroidectomy which has to be undertaken, but all children, most of them, will also need a central compartmental node dissection because they may be having macronodular or micronodular micrometastatic nodal disease. So ideally speaking, the rule of thumb is children presenting with DTC, the surgeon, a high volume surgeon, must undertake total thyroidectomy along with central compartmental nodal dissection. If there are nodes in the lateral compartment, that also needs excision. if it is documented. So this is the most important initial step in the management of pediatric DTCs. So let us move on to the role of high-dose iodine-131 therapy in children. We know there are not many details, there are not many literature evidence on treatment of pediatric DTCs. There are no randomized control trials. We need to understand the issues because these are children. What are the doses? What is the complication? And how to take care of the parental counseling. One such study from the Belarus group has shown 740 children who underwent radioiodine therapy in 464 patients. In this particular study, 73% of the children showed residual disease, while only 27 had distant metastasis. And fortunately, in this study, there was a good control in more than 58 patients of DTC pediatric children. Understanding the dosage, a lot of confusion. We are worried because the body mass is less and the age groups have they attained menarche. What about the epiphyseal growth plate problems? All these things have to be kept in mind, and a balanced judgment is warranted. We need to understand, are we going to go ahead with an empiric dosage or dosimetry-based dosage? Because pulmonary metastasis can produce life-threatening problems like pulmonary fibrosis. So there are studies by Warburg et al. Who say limit the maximum radiation absorbed dose to the blood to 2 gray. And also we must understand that which is the dose which can be administered safely but high. Same way, we must also follow the ALARA rule as given by Benoit and Maxon. So one such study, which was published in the Thyroid Journal and also in the Journal of Nuclear Medicine, they recommend using 100 to 150 millicurie when there is only residual thyroid bed disease. When there is cervical nodal metastasis, they have given as high as 150 millicurie, and they have even given 200 millicurie for lung metastasis. So this is almost like the adult dosage which this particular group of researchers have administered. So let us just go through the consensus of high-dose radioiodine therapy. In children who have attained menarche or who are physically mature, bone age has been attained with distant metastasis, I think we should give a good dose around 100 to 200 millicurie depending on the documented iodine-131 concentrating sites. In younger children, it has been recommended to give around 1.3 to 2.7 millicurie per kilogram body weight. So we must try to give a good dose around 5.4 millicurie per kilogram body weight or higher without exceeding the marrow toxicity levels. And in patients who are having localized residual thyroid disease alone, maybe 30 millicurie should be enough to take care of the disease. So just wanted to touch upon our limited experience in the past 15 to 20 years. We have chosen patients who are less than 18 years in the child adolescent group. We have treated around 130 DTC patients, and majority of them were of the papillary histology. And in our study, most of them at presentation had nodal disease. Around 74 patients had nodal disease. And all of them underwent a total thyroidectomy along with the central compartmental neck dissection, followed 3 weeks later by a high-dose radioiodine therapy. Care was being taken to prepare the children properly with no seafood diet, because this is an area where people have a lot of seafoods. So salt restriction and seafoods were avoided for 3 to 4 weeks. And we normally advocate 30 to 100 millicurie per sitting based on the presence of residual disease, nodal, and distant metastasis. And patients who had distant metastasis, very few of them needed 4 sittings, only 2 patients, while all others we were able to take care with multiple sittings. And there was a good outcome from our study as of now. Just wanted to discuss 2 or 3 representative cases. So this is a 12-year-old child who presented with the TI-RADS 3, right lobe. Unfortunately, the child had a slightly high-risk histology, cribriform morular type, underwent total thyroidectomy. Stimulated values, serum thyroglobulin was not very high, 13.5, but still obviously needs treatment. And we, in the whole body iodine and residual thyroid scan, you can see that there is presence of residual thyroid tissue along with suspicious lymph nodal metastasis. So child was treated with 70 millicurie, and follow-up scans showed a good successful ablation and with a significant biochemical response in the form of drop in thyroglobulin was achieved. Another child, 17-year-old, diffuse sclerosing type multifocal with high-risk histological features, underwent total thyroidectomy and dissection, nodal dissection. Unfortunately, the child continues to have significant persistent thyroglobulin antibodies, more than 4,000 international units. Patient was treated with 3 sittings of high-dose radioiodine therapy. Patient had not only nodal disease, but also bilateral lung micronodular disease. And till the last time, patient persistently has functioning bilateral pulmonary metastasis, along with a persistently elevated thyroglobulin antibodies. So in these patients, maybe the next time we should be going ahead with the whole body iodine scan, because there is persistence of functional metastasis. Whole body FDG PET-CT may also be advocated to see for any response or any surgical intervention which can be done to remove some of the nodes so that the antibody levels drop down. So another case, a similar kind of a patient with multifocal papillary thyroid carcinoma and nodal metastasis. Residual thyroid scan in 2023 showed iodine concentrating residual thyroid disease along with lymph nodal, along with lung metastasis. Stimulated TG was 3,000 plus. 3 doses of radioiodine therapy was given. Unfortunately, the response to the drop in stimulated thyroglobulin was not very high, although it was there, it's not very high. So we documented the patient to show FDG avid mediastinal lymph nodes and lung metastasis, which were FDG non-avid. So the contentious issue, is it refractory? Yes, maybe. Should we give TKIs? What is the role of TKI in children? We shall be discussing later. So coming to the another important aspect of whole body iodine scan and treatment with thyrogen, recombinant human assisted thyroglobulin. So as in adults, we can use the same for children. The same adult regimen of 2 intramuscular injections on 2 successive days, followed by radioiodine administration orally, followed by scan and therapy on the subsequent days as a 5-day protocol can be followed. The advantage of using recombinant assisted whole body iodine scanners, children are school going, studying, so concentration of the regular activities in day to day, the reducing the total body radiation exposure is all there, but we must take the cost factor into consideration. And also we must note that recombinant TSH is still not approved in children. And those children who cannot afford or families who cannot afford, we always have the backup of using the T3 tablets, which can be given at 0.7 microgram per kilogram body weight for 2 weeks and then discontinue for the last 2 weeks before going ahead with radioiodine administration for the scan. So coming to the ATA guidelines, we know that the recent ATA guidelines is for the adults. and we follow the 2015 ATA guidelines for pediatric DTCs. So there is the recommendation 8, which favors the use of BRAF mutation in adults, is not recommended for children, because we have just seen that there is more of gene translocation, or there's more rearrangements is more common in children. So the yield will not be very good if you are going ahead with this genetic profiling. When we are going through the recommendation 14 of the ATA guidelines 2015, in adults, once in 6 to 18 months for benign thyroid nodules, ultrasound is recommended, but in children, it is recommended every 6 months. Similarly, in adults, total thyroidectomy is recommended for tumors which are 4 centimeter or larger. In children, that size is not the criteria, and we should be going ahead with the total thyroidectomy and nodal clearance. As I told, the recommendation 27 also is different for a pediatric age group, where total thyroidectomy has to be done along with the central compartmental neck dissection for all T1 to T4 disease. The AJCC and TNM classification do not hold good for children. And similarly, the radioiodine therapy is indicated even for the early stage T1 and T2 disease, unlike in adults, where it is reserved only for patients with T3 and T4 tumors. As the recommendation 40, the TSH suppression for high and intermediate risk is only for adults. In children, when there is no evidence of active disease, you must avoid TSH suppression, and a low normal range of 0.5 micro international units per liter should be advocated in children. Coming to the follow-up, as regularly for adults, we must go ahead with the stimulated labs, ultrasound neck, and a whole body iodine scan. Children who are documented as disease-free will show a TG of less than 0.1 microgram per limit and not 2 micrograms. It's very important. And those children who are showing more than 0.1 microgram per limit per liters, further investigations are to be conducted. Please get a thyroglobulin and thyroglobulin antibodies done once in 6 to 12 months. Either it can be a stimulated or an unstimulated value. Raised thyroglobulin antibody is found to be more common in children. Ideally speaking, a follow-up ultrasound neck is recommended once every 6 months. What is the take on the whole body iodine scan? It is contentious. When there is no residual disease, that is, the uptake value is less than 0.1, I think a wait and watch can be followed. But those children with persistent functioning residual thyroid or distant metastasis, the follow-up can be planned as in adults. So moving on to another port, which we come across in children, although it is rare, mostly hyperthyroidism in children is attributed to Graves and constitutes around 1 to 5% of all Graves, of all hyperthyroidism. The children usually present with unexplained tachycardia, goiter, stare. They can also show unexplained petechiae. Some of the children have presentations as hyperbilirubinemia. Children of mothers who are showing high TSH antibody titers, or there is a family history of another sibling having a hyperthyroid, need further evaluation and strict management. So why do we need to discuss so much? Neonatal hyperthyroidism is due to the transplacental passage from the mother cord blood to the cord blood. So these children tend to get hyperthyroidism. The other thing is children who are less, and this neonatal hyperthyroidism may be transient, but those children where it may be permanent needs more management, more investigation, because it can lead to CNS abnormalities like difficulty in focusing in studies, having attention span deficits. There can be increased bone skeletal maturity leading to cranial synostosis. So these things have to be tackled early. So once such a child presents to the endocrinology or to the nuclear medicine OP, we must direct the patient to undergo the panel of tests so that we identify presence or absence of hyperthyroidism in these children. Unlike adults, the ophthalmic complications like Graves or orbitopathy is rare. And normally, endocrinologists usually treat these children with antithyroid drugs. But we need to be careful because compliance, drug toxicity, and relapse is higher in children. So a permanent cure should be offered either in the form of radioiodine therapy or surgical, that is total thyroidectomy. But we know that these surgical options should be done by high volume surgeons because even presence of a tiny remnant can flare up a recurrence of thyroid Graves' disease in children. So let us just see how this dosage needs to be done for children. It is usually ideal in children who are over 5 years of age and in those children where the thyroid tissue is not grossly enlarged, that it is around less than 60 grams, their radioiodine may be the ideal. But in other situations where the gland is larger or the children are more older, surgery may be the most optimum management strategy. We can achieve a high success rate with radioiodine if we are treating the children with 220 to 275 microcuries per gram of radioiodine, giving a total absorbed dose of 200 to 250 gray to the thyroid. But we must take into consideration the age and the maturity status of the child, especially in girls. We also need to take if the gland is large and if the antithyroid drugs have been stopped for quite some time and patient is frankly toxic, we can precipitate a thyroid storm. So care should be taken to understand if the child needs hospitalization in a single room prior, at least for the next 3 to 4 days when you're trying to treat these patients with a low dose radioiodine therapy. Similarly, patients who are being contemplated for surgery, we need to understand what can be the complications. Same way, if you are going to treat the child with multiple doses of low-dose radioiodine therapy, what can be the so-called long-term effects needs to be explained to the parents. We must not forget that there are some late effects of radioiodine therapy, like precipitating another solid organ malignancies. You can also have thyroid malignancies again in these children, and surgically you can also have hyperparathyroidism. So there is one such study, which is the report from the cooperative thyrotoxicosis therapy, which was published in Journal of Endocrine Metabolism, which clearly elaborates the outcome in these patients, which you can go through. So let us go through the final say. What is the take-home message? Children with thyroid disorders need specialized care and treatment. We need to go ahead aggressively in the management of patients with pediatric patients with the DTC, and radioiodine is the answer for children with hyperthyroidism, especially in those who have prior to menarche or where it is indicated. In DTCs, the rule of thumb is high volume surgeon must perform both a total thyroidectomy as a central compartmental nodal dissection. 30 millicurie of radioiodine can be treated effectively in a patient with a single focus of differentiated thyroid carcinoma with no lymph nodal metastasis. The dosage can be increased depending on the presence or absence of nodal or distant metastasis to 100 to 150. So for residual disease, the recommended dose is 1.3 to 2.7 millicurie per kilogram body weight is effective to deliver the cytocidal effect on the thyrocytes. And pre-treatment dosimetry using iodine 131 is ideal but it is not available, and you need softwares to calculate the lesional dosimetry if you want to go ahead with the dosimetric studies. Follow-up is ideally with stimulated thyroglobulin, ultrasound neck, and whole body iodine scans. And after we are done with all these things, maintaining the TSH levels in these children is very important. You should try to maintain less than 0.1 milli-international units per liter in patients with nodal disease, and those with no active disease, try to keep it at the lower level. But one thing should be kept in mind is children with either DTC or hyperthyroidism, long-term follow-up is very essential. So let us now discuss, and we may put forward these our experience into some format so that we can come out with a Indian perspective of treating DTC patients in pediatric setting in India. Thank you very much for patient learning.